Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Prater here again. We're going to take a look at how we view history, how we look at history, and some of the strategies that we're going to use to help us sort of figure everything out. I want to start by introducing, and hopefully you've seen this before in your previous courses, we look at history through a lens called ESPN: economic, social, political, and environmental. These four perspectives will give us sort of a guide as you look at all of the historical content that we have in this class. So let's break that down. What does that look like? Well, first, economic and social. So any type of economic lens or perspective could be anything monetary or money related, right? Trade, technology, employment, the standard of living. And then when we talk about social perspective, how people are living with their families, gender roles, like the roles of women, traditions, religion, education, and once again, standard of living. So looking at how people live. When we get to the political and environmental lens, that's when we sort of shift gears a little bit. Obviously, when you're talking about politics, we're looking at things that are government related, anything physically, geographically, the role of government, elections, political participation, and so on. And then when we talk about environmental lens of perspective, that one's a bit more unique. One of the more interesting ones are like the physical and human factors, even things like natural disasters, and how we actually affect the environment that we live in. So that about wraps it up for ESPN. Now we're going to talk about our timeline, okay? We break this course up into different eras, all right? We start with laying the foundation. That's actually not listed here, but we just briefly talk about, as we discussed in our last lesson, we talked about the the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. We will soon talk about the Bill of Rights. We go through westward expansion all the way through the modern era in 2008. So we cover a great deal of history here. And we're going to look at all of those different events and changes and characteristics of each specific era. And hopefully you guys get very familiar with these. Now, two strategies that we're going to use to pull apart the documents and images from these era. One of them is called SOAPS, and the other one is called Optic, and we'll get to Optic in just a second. Okay, but we're going to actually break each excerpt or short reading down by just writing this out. SOAPS. S is for speaker, O is for the occasion, A is for audience, P is for purpose, S is for subject. So there are two S's. As long as you know that one's a speaker and one's a subject, I think we're in good shape there. But it is very important that you understand exactly what SOAPS means and what we use it for. We use these for readings. Optic, on the other hand, we use for visuals. O stands for overview, P stands for parts, T stands for title, I stands for interrelationships, and we'll talk more about that one later. It's a little bit tricky. And C is for conclusion. So now, I want us to go ahead and practice Optic, okay? You will be provided with a card that looks just like this. It will ask you the same questions, and when you actually work on an Optic, you will ask these questions. So for the overview, what do you see in a picture? Well, let's take a look at a picture real quick. Right here. What do you see? Okay, so for an overview, I could say something like, I see a man who looks like he is in jail. Okay, but there are all sorts of different things that you notice about him, and that's when we get to parts. So let me go back here. Parts, examine the key elements or parts of the visual and make notations of the details that seem important. Okay, and we typically want to see 3 of those things. All right, so let's go back and take a look. What parts do we see? Well, and it's important that we try and do this in complete sentences, okay? I see that the man is wearing nice clothes. He is leaning on a sign that talks about bribery and corruption. Okay, those are a couple of examples, and you would obviously add a third there. Now, title. Some of these optics will have a title, okay? Some of them won't. In this instance, we don't have a title, so it's your job to come up with one, okay? So, if the picture has one, great, and you can give a little bit more information on what the title is and how it relates to the picture. But if it doesn't have a title, let's come up with one. Okay, so I would say a good title for this would be Corruption Looks Like, let me capitalize this, Wealth. Okay, corruption looks like wealth. So bribery and corruption, as you can see, okay, lots of money being removed here from what looks like Lady Liberty, who is blindfolded. Okay, so those are some of the key things right under her nose every day in the week. So there's a lot of bribery and corruption going on in the United States. And while this guy's in jail, he's wearing a nice necklace. Okay, he's got jail clothes on, but all of this looks really nice. So interrelationships. How does all this work together? In this instance, you would come up with a sentence or two that explains how everything works together. So what relationship do each of the parts and title have to one another? Okay, how do they work together? What do you think the message of the cartoon is? And does this cartoon image show a bias? So these are 3 questions that if you can answer 1 to 2 of these, you're going to get full credit when we're talking about Optic, okay? So maybe this individual was arrested for bribery and corruption, but is still living his best life in jail. That's possible. Okay. And then a conclusion. And I'm actually going to leave this one up to you guys. But a conclusion for this. Okay. What is the main idea? You're trying to draw, like, at the end of the day, what are you looking at? What is this telling us? And you can use all of the parts from Optic to sort of tell you that. Okay. Now, with SOAPS, when it comes to the speaker, it's very straightforward. Who's telling the story? Okay. It could be a narrator. Okay. You may not know who it is, so it would just be a narrator. It may explicitly say who wrote the story. Okay. Make sure that you do your best to figure out who is writing the story. If it's not explicitly stated, tell me a little bit more about that. Whose side might they be on, or, maybe they're writing a newspaper story, things like that. Occasion is the time and place of a text. Okay, so where and when did the story take place? And this can be an era if used in U.S. history, or if there's a date listed within the article or something like that. That can be a clue as to when and where this took place. Audience, A. Okay, this is the group of people that the text is directed at. So who is the text addressing? Now, there's a couple of things here. One of those things that it's not necessarily a cheat, but it's something that's helpful, is oftentimes you can look at an academic audience for the majority of these. However, there are going to be some texts that we read that are addressing a specific audience, and it's your job to make sure that you're able to identify that. Purpose, the reason behind the text. What is the speaker's reason for writing the text? Purpose is not what this is about. It's the reason why it's being written. Okay. So the speaker, why are they writing the text? Okay. And then the subject would once again lean on the main idea. What did you just read? Explain it. Now it's your turn. You will move on to the next folder in Schoology and complete the SOAPS in Optic. Have a great day, everybody.